Welcome to Mr. B's Ukulele.
Welcome back to the second part of Mr. B's review of Shogun Total War Expert Mode Dickytorial Season 2. In this episode I'm going to be looking in depth at how both players' campaigns progressed, how they started very similarly and then diverged and ended totally differently. We will be looking at what went right for Mr. B and what ultimately went wrong for Dicky, even though it could be argued he did so many things so well. I'll be comparing battle styles and looking at the different approaches on the campaign screen. I'll be looking at some of the great victories and some of the shocking defeats, and there will be controversy as well. I'll be talking about how much of a game changer those open borders were at the start, and also whether it was a glitch in the system that saw the death of Lord Dicky and the disintegration of his clan at the end. I will try and get to grips with the enormity of Kohai's 33 episode creation and give you an overview of some of the key moments both on the battlefield and off it. Stay tuned, ladies and jelly spoons, off we go. Wow, so where do I start? There's so much to look at here. Let's start at the beginning and see where it goes. So we can see here that both players withdraw from battle against Mori at the start of the campaigns, and consolidate their forces in the north of Japan around modern day Tokyo. Keep in mind we are looking at Japan from the east, so all map directions can become very confusing very quickly. Dicky did consider trying to stake a claim to the southern territories around Aki early on.
Now what do I do? Would I now concentrate these forces and buffer these two together, because that's only two provinces? There is a little gap in there, isn't there? So if I do try and secure this point before territories I'm capturing, rather than attack from two, we'll just come back.
Thought you were going to pull out. So.
Yeah, I think that may be a wise decision to just save this entire army. So we are literally... I'm going to push these into here.
It would have made it for interesting viewing if he had done that, and then I think we would have followed quite different strategies. But I tried to persuade him to follow what I'd done at the beginning, because I know from experience, if you try and defend both sets of territories at the same time, you get annihilated very quickly, and I don't think that would have made for a very entertaining series. So we both end up consolidating in the northern territories, and straight away we are discussing different battle tactics, with Dicky and Kohai's preference for horses becoming clear.
Yes! Full horse!
As does my own aversion to using cavalry altogether.
Decimated.
They have just been decimated.
Oh, dead horses in that
That's why I don't like cavalry archers.
Which generally comes from a reluctance to micromanage quite at the level required to really use them well. And we see Dicky really micromanaging at that level for a lot of the campaign, and doing a much better job than I've ever managed to do. Then Dicky starts looking to the south to his border with Imagawa, and I straight away talk about getting a foothold at the very end of the map and consolidate my forces ahead of a bid to take control of Dewa and Mutsu up here in the corner. Now this would have given me the perfect starting point from which to build a campaign. It is a high risk strategy, and it's not guaranteed to work because you have to claim that territory from Lord Wesigi, who obviously is already there. That said, it is a tactic I've used before quite a few times to very good effect, so I was confident I could pull it off. But then, before I made my big move, Lord Hojo left his river border open, which caused an immediate re-evaluation of all of my plans. Now, I'm going to try and consider this from both sides here. On the one hand, I was very lucky to be gifted this territory, and I subsequently completely changed my strategy, which is potentially a big advantage to me in the campaign. On the other hand, Hojo does come back and defend the territory, so it's not completely gifted, and I have to fight for it. Also, you really have to seize your chances in this game, and if the AI throws you a curveball like this, you have to grab hold of that moment. If we look at this shot, which comes from episode 4, we can see that Lord Imagawa has also left this border open with Shinano for Dicky, completely empty. And Dicky could have seized that as well and taken advantage at that point, but he doesn't. He passes up on that, and so we can see a more cautious approach there. So what I'm saying is, yes, the computer did give me an opportunity, but you have to seize those chances to move forward in the game. And this is the crux of the difference between the two campaign styles. On the one hand, I consciously try and seize every opportunity to attack the enemy and push forward, but Dicky is very cautious and misses several opportunities to advance. As I will discuss later in the video review, this has long-lasting ramifications for his campaign, and later undermines a lot of the great moves that he does begin to make. This starts to show itself in episode 4, where Dicky starts building alliances and is actually very reluctant to press forward and attack anyone. He gets an alliance with Lord Mori, which does make sense, but also signs an alliance with Hojo. Now Mori is far away, so to have an alliance with him potentially could be helpful later in the game and stop Mori immediately attacking when they eventually do meet. So that does have a lot to go for it. Yet to ally with Lord Hojo is right on his border basically means Dicky's not interested in expanding at this early stage of the game. Now as you will see in my campaign, I try very hard to get to the edge of the map as quickly as I can and try and keep the war just on one front by having my back to the sea. But by allying himself to Lord Hojo, Dicky commits to being stuck in the middle of the map there, with Hojo to his right and Imagawa to his left and Wesuji up above him. And although he does turn his attention on Imagawa to the south, it means he spends a lot of the time subsequently trying to avoid battle on the other fronts, and he has to tread very carefully throughout the early stages of the campaign. I think it's perfectly encapsulated in this little soundbite from Dicky himself.
Who's actually at war with me?
No one.
No one. Oh. Yet. So I'm just going to end the turn. Just if anyone's at peace with me first, then I'm going to just have this time to regain. That's fine.
If everyone's okay with me, I'm going to end the turn there.
His cautious approach comes to a head early on with his first big defeat on the river against Lord Hojo. This is in episode 8, and he loses 352 men to Hojo's losses of just 133. Now, it's only a net loss of 200 men, but after this we see his whole campaign stall. The battle begins well, and we can see Dicky straight away going into the attack with his horses. This style has worked really well for Dicky before, and we'll see that later on in the video review. And it is a very good tactic. He sends his cavalry straight over the river and tries to get round behind the enemy so he can attack them both from the bridge and from behind at the same time. It nearly works and some units get through, but Hojo cuts him off and blocks the bridge early on. Then Dicky gets a bit distracted with a bit too much micromanagement and actually takes his eye off the battle several times at key moments. His main force is then driven back, so his advanced force is left stranded and inevitably loses morale and then tries to flee through Hojo's army back across the bridge. It's a bit messy and it's a bit of a disaster, but not a critical defeat. Yet the way Dicky responds to it is the problem. Now, we can see here that I have various defeats in the early stages of the game, some of which are quite bad. If we take a moment to have a look at those now, you'll see that in these early battles, Dicky and his cavalry are far more effective on the battlefield than I am in many of my attacks. If we gloss over my issue with the arrows...
Oh, they're out of arrows?
Oh, yeah.
They haven't got any arrows?
Uh-oh.
Why have they not got arrows?
Yeah, why have they not got arrows?
His cavalry archers
He's lost it!
are rubbish!
or of me getting lost in the fog.
Over here. There we go.
Yes.
Right, what's he got?
Easy pickings.
Well, you'd hope.
No.
No, it's just the initial combat. You've got it. You
I haven't.
No, you haven't got him.
Well, what are they?
I don't know, but that's
Samurai
bloody
archers.
A, they were in the trees. B, your guys were quite tired from walking around the map. They basically just waited for you to find us.
I still have some careless defeats where I just didn't get it right, and in expert mode you really have to be on top form to win all of the battles. So at the end of the day, you are going to lose some battles. And this battle here in Hida is an example of that. It was a mess. I hadn't realised they were in the trees to the left there, so my attempt to come at the enemy on two fronts led to half of my army being ambushed, and it just fell apart from there and finished with a rather painful defeat. But what I did do was attack again soon after, and as I had actually attacked a Wari simultaneously and then actually won in a Wari, it was still a good result for me. I went back in 2 turns later, and as we see here, I then went on to win in Hida. So the net result was a small setback and then carried on to get a much greater push forward. And the point here is that defeats are an inevitable part of the game, but it's how you deal with defeat that matters. You need to bounce back and make sure they don't slow your advance against the AI players. Yet if we return to Dicky and his defeat on the river, we see him really freeze on the campaign screen now. It's 1538, but he doesn't actually attack the province again until 1543, 18 turns later. What he needed to do was pile the troops back in and take it over as quickly as possible, yet he waits and waits. And this delay, this painful delay, plays a key part in the campaign, and I believe in how it ultimately unravels for him at the end. Right, enough talk of our litany of defeats. Let's focus on some positives in each campaign before we round up with a look at the battle stats and that controversial ending in episode 3. I want to look at 2 wonderful victories, one for each player, and discuss the different battle tactics we tended to favour. Let's start by looking at one of Dicky's brilliant early victories. There were quite a few to choose from here, but I've selected this one from episode 8, where he attacks Hojo across the river in Musashi. He had 660 men against 528, with a lot of cavalry on his side. Now normally with those sorts of numbers you would expect the defender to win, especially on a river crossing. But he really puts his horses to good use on the river, something that I always thought was a bit of a recipe for disaster. Bridges and horses don't normally go together. So it's an impressive victory that shows Dicky at his very best. We see him doing here what he tried in the other clip I showed you just now, where he gets an advanced party of cavalry across the river to get behind the enemy lines. Yet this time Hojo leaves him the space to do it, and Dicky takes full advantage. It's still touch and go a few times as Hojo tries to close the door in the river, but it's too late. Dicky's got his cavalry around the back of the army. We also see here Dicky's strategy of holding off with his cavalry archers and peppering the enemy from a distance, which is something he does time and again to great effect in lots of his battles. Ultimately, Hojo's forces just can't cope with the mobility of Dicky's cavalry, and after a stout defence, we just see them crumple and retreat. In contrast, we see my attacking style is very different. Ironically, I avoid cavalry troops as much as I can and only ever use the ones I started with, but I do use my general's cavalry unit over and over again in battle, and always use him to spearhead my attacks. I find this is a great tactic, but you have to be careful because, as we will ultimately find out, if you lose your general in battle, it can be catastrophic. So I rely much more heavily on standard samurai and archers, but as we can see here, I employ similar tactics to Dicky on a smaller scale with my general, and generally use him to soften up the enemy before my main attack. But although I fare okay when attacking, my real strength lies in defensive battles, and I just wanted to share my favourite battle from the whole series, although in fairness to Dicky, he does equally well in defence on many occasions.
Archers are brutal in this game. They really are. I didn't realise how good they are.
Yeah,
That hill was just...
Nice.
Wow. 2 men!
2 men to almost 500 taken.
So here we are in Kozuke. It's early on in the game, I'm trying to establish myself over Hojo, yet suddenly I've got Hojo and Imagawa attacking me together, with a massive force of 548 men to my 239. Now this is a key win for me, because if I'd lost the battle, I'd have lost all my momentum against Lord Hojo, and he would have been much stronger, and I'd also have ended up with Imagawa really breathing down my neck. As you can see from the screenshot, he actually attacks Musashi as well, but then subsequently withdraws after his defeat in Kozuke. So it really is a critical win for me, and I feel this is a key moment in the early development of my very aggressive campaign that really sees me push past many of the clans around me. So the battle is a real turning point and really allows me to continue knocking back those AI players and firmly establish myself at the end of the map. So I've got a force here about 2/5 the size of the enemy, and to be honest with you, in expert mode you'd often expect to lose with those sort of numbers because your forces are just going to lose heart very quickly. So it really was touch and go. But I've got archers and I've got the mountains, and you can see me here placing my men carefully high up on the mountain slopes to take the best defensive position I could. Now my favourite shot is this lovely purple column of men advancing up the middle of the map. I wasn't so happy about it at the time, because you realise when you see this just how big an advantage the AI has. I also have Imagawa sneaking in at me from the side, but I make the sensible decision here to ignore him and focus on the main attack. It's really satisfying to see that column just completely collapse at the front under the weight of the archer fire and clever use of my supporting spearmen in general. I finish up with just my general's unit on the map, but managed to eke out an important victory in the end. Strategically, I think this was a real turning point and allowed me to continue to advance across the map. Tactically, it was a very satisfying victory and a fun one to analyse there. Right, I'll leave it there for part 2 of this Dickytorial review. In the next episode we will look at how both campaigns finished and look at some fabulous battle stats.